The 1995 Ghost in the Shell film is a masterwork of not just animation, but of storytelling. Everything from the visuals to the deep and complex subject matter are all brilliantly handled to such a degree that there has been no film since that has even come close to reaching it. Ghost in the Shell is a film that stands at the zenith of what anime is capable of. It is the benchmark. It stands on Mount Olympus, daring others to reach its greatness, which few, if any, will ever do. So, as you can imagine, trying to adapt Ghost in the Shell in any language or country is like trying to calm a chihuahua that's been given a gram of cocaine. Now, imagine that, but at the same time, you're also trying to cook a four-course meal while Gordon Ramsay is standing behind you calling you a fucking Muppet. And that's about how hard it is for a Western production company to adapt it. So, with that being said, what does the ranter think about the 2017 live-action adaptation of Ghost in the Shell? Well, it's not bad. That's right, I said it. I don't think it's that bad. There are some places where it definitely has issues, and I may seek further review when the movie gets a home release, but for now I think a general overview will suffice. Visually, this movie is a feast. There is so much to take in, and the cinematography is rich with color and steeped in atmosphere. It reflects what I think is a very futuristic, consumeristic, and technologically dependent world. It feels bright, but at the same time very lonely, very dark and seedy. There are a few places here and there where the CG tends to stick out like an eye cancer, but for the most part there's some great practical and computer effects that make the world believable enough. With Rupert Sanders at the helm, I honestly wasn't that worried going in as far as visuals, and as far as I can see, they were handled with great care, especially in the scenes that were recreated from the original 1995 film. I think what worried me the most about this film was whether or not an American director could approach such a philosophically charged theme as sentience and identity with any real grace or substantive storytelling. And the answer is, While I felt like they broached the same themes of the original work, I also felt like it had a very Hollywood way of handling it. While they had those same questions of what forms an individual and what separates body from mind, I think the real chief difference is that the 2017 adaptation attempts to give you an answer, whereas the original 1995 film simply asked the questions and let the viewer decide on what they wanted to believe. While I don't think the idea of embracing individuality and your own experience is a bad direction to go, I think the idea of revenge and hidden identity has become such a cliche that it left a bit of a bad taste. Still, I think the surface level of it is okay for the type of film that was made, and it certainly didn't fail as poorly as I was expecting it would. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't address the idea of whitewashing, because there seem to be a lot of people decrying this film on those grounds, and it's honestly a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. If I say I don't mind the casting of Scarlett Johansson, then there's one group of people that will say I am ignorant regarding representation of minorities in Hollywood. If I say I would have preferred an Asian actress, I'm a sensitive cuck who needs to grow a pair. And honestly, I fall somewhere in the middle. I would have preferred an Asian actress since the origin of the characters seemed to be Eastern, but I also understand the source material enough to know that the physical representation in the given world of Ghost in the Shell doesn't really factor in one way or another. In short, I think they cast the best possible actress given the circumstances. Scarlett Johansson has a good reach in terms of box office. She has decent enough range to pull off the major emotionally, and she is definitely physically adept enough to perform the stunts required. So I honestly thought she was a good fit, and there are times in the movie where I look at her and see the major. I can't speak for anyone else in this regard, but I felt as though she did a good job with the role. Another point I see constantly bantered about with much contention is whether or not Ghost in the Shell is based on strictly Eastern philosophy. And I'd like to go ahead and put that idea to rest. The simple answer is no. Ghost in the Shell, while it is an amalgam of some Eastern and Western ideas, the ideas about self and the ideas of what experiences and thoughts go into sentient being have been explored in science fiction literature for decades, and for quite a bit of time before the source material was even released. In fact, Masamune Shirow took inspiration for the story and even the title from Ghost in the Machine, a 1960s book of philosophy written by Arthur Koestler, i.e., not an Asian. To try and say this story is unique to Asian culture is demonstrably wrong, especially when films like Blade Runner, which has similar philosophical elements, predates the manga by 7 years, and the first Ghost in the Shell film by 13. And if you want to go back even further, Blade Runner is based on the 1968 novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, i.e., also not an Asian. In this regard, I don't think it's fair to simply dismiss the film on the basis that it's a Western adaptation of a property from an Asian country, especially when the themes and ideas in the movie are not unique to their culture. It's one thing if it's something like 47 Ronin, which is completely steeped in Japanese history and culture. It's another for a fictional story with an amalgam of Eastern and Western ideas. So let's get down to brass tacks. If you're looking for something incredibly faithful to the source material, then you're going to be disappointed. This is an adaptation. It's essentially someone else's remake/vision of the Ghost in the Shell property, and as such, I'm completely fine with accepting it on its own merit while still examining its homages and tie-ins to the original work. In my opinion, if you want to see something exactly like the anime, then don't bother. Just watch the anime. It honestly doesn't get any better than Mamoru Oshii's magnum opus. Personally, when I look at an adaptation, I'm looking for the spirit of the original work and what new idea is brought to the table. And if you can't faithfully recreate something, then you might as well do something new with it. And I feel like this film straddles that line of doing something new enough to be its own, but familiar enough to feel like it's Ghost in the Shell. So, if you're willing to give this film its own room to do something different, but still carry the name, then give it a shot. If not, then pop that 1995 classic into your VCR and pretend like 2017 is just a dream.